I'm calling the meeting to order tonight until a chair and a vice chair has been selected. So I will call the June 20th, 2022 Parks and Recreation Committee to order. It's 4:03. Do we have any public comment or suggestions? Mr. Gisselman?
Gary Gisselman, 319 Park Avenue, Wausau, Wisconsin, Alderperson, 5th District. I just want to bring to your attention, many years ago, this park committee was very involved with presenting and investigating clear cutting of urban trees, our urban trees, street trees. And I'm not sure if you have been, let's go back a couple years. Town Line Road is one of the more recent ones, I think up on Kickbush. I'm sure what was the project within the last couple years. And now we see North 4th Avenue off of North 4th Avenue north of Bridge Street, pretty much clear cut. And I think that the city will ask this park committee again to take a look at that. There was a policy written. We had people from Milwaukee coming up telling the city how that we should be proceeding with reconstructing streets and how we should be dealing with trees. Well, if you take a look up on 4th Avenue, you'll see that. And I'm sure that there was every good reason for every tree that was cut down. But I think that we have to be diligent in looking at our urban forest and our urban trees, street trees. I think we have to be more protective, and that's what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment or suggestions? Okay, seeing none. Can I get approval of the minutes from April 4th? It seems like a really long time ago, but April 4th, 2022? Ms. Watson? And Lou, a second? Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. On to number 4, discussion and possible action electing the chair and the vice chair for the committee. And then I'm going to turn this over to that person. Can I have a nomination for chair?
I would nominate.
Oh, Ms. Sorry.
I would nominate Don Herbst.
Okay. Nominate. So, and Mrs. Herbst, do you accept the nomination? Yes. Mr. Killian, do you accept the nomination?
Yes.
Okay, since I have 2, Ms. Jacobson, you might have to help me with this, or the mayor. Since I have 2, would I do this by written vote, or do we do it out loud? Public. Not a secret ballot? Okay. So we'll start with the nomination for Alder Herbst. All those in favor of Alder Herbst being the chair of the committee, please say aye or raise your hand. 3. All those opposed, I guess. We have 2. Okay. So that would be majority. So do I have to do anything further? Did I do that correctly?
Yeah, that's close enough. Then,
Okay.
yes. You probably wouldn't take a vote for Tom.
Come up here.
Oh, sorry. I should have asked you about this ahead of time. I thought we've done it many times.
I'm sorry. Yes, you took the vote for Dawn. You could take the vote for Tom, but you know that it's probably going to be 2 to 3.
Mm-hmm.
So you can declare Dawn the chair of the committee and then take nominations for vice chair.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Herbst, would you like to take over? Or would you?
I'd like to nominate for vice chair.
Okay, nominate for vice chair? Sure.
Yes, Carol Lukens.
Okay. Ms. Lukens, do you accept that nomination? Yes. All right. Any other?
Tom Killian.
Okay. And Mr. Killian, do you accept that nomination?
Yes.
All right. So since Carol was nominated first, we'll do the same thing as I just did. All those in favor of Alder Lukens as the vice chair, please raise your hand. 2?
I vote as well.
Yes, you vote, because we have 3, we have only a 5, so, okay, 3-2. So I'm assuming that's you're the vice chair, Ms. Lukens, so thank you. So, Ms. Herbst, I'm going to turn this over to you now. I'll move out of your way.
I don't think you better go too far.
No, I guess I have the next one. All right.
I think that most of this you will be conducting.
Yes, Ms. Jacobson and I will be talking about this next item. So, okay. For the next item, I can move on to that since I will be taking that. It's the roles, responsibility, and authority of the Park Commission and the city's Parks Committee. So Ms. Jacobson and I and the mayor possibly will be kind of talking this through with the committee as to what your role and responsibility are that we have found, and what the Park Commission roles and responsibility are that we found. So to go back before this committee's time, this was really questioned back in 2018 with the previous board when COVID started, and we needed to shut down specific park facilities based on what the CDC was recommending in our health department. So the question was asked of what my authority as the parks director was over city parks and county parks. So that resurrected kind of a decade long discussion on how this joint department works within the city and the county. So to go back even further, the city and the county have had a joint director for almost 100 years, since 1924. And they had, for many years, 2 joint kind of departments or operations, but a joint director. Then in 1974, I guess prior to that, in 1973, the state revised their statutes to allow the county to have power and jurisdiction over city facilities and parks if both the city and the county agreed to that and provided some sort of agreement. So through a resolution in 1974, the city and the county did just that. In 1974, the city basically relinquished all of their authority over the park system and the staffing of the Parks Department to the county. So it's been more of a contract basis since. And in that agreement in 1974, the city was supposed to dissolve their Parks Committee and the county was supposed to dissolve their Parks Commission. And then they formed this Parks Commission, a new Park Commission, made up of 3 city council members, 3 county board members, and a member at large. And that's the commission we have today. It's still that way. We have the 3 city council members are appointed, or they are recommended by the mayor to the county administrator, and then he appoints all 7 members, and it's a 7-year term. So it goes along with 7 years or for the length of what your term is as an elected official. So with that, also in 1974, all of the city staff that was Parks Department staff was given over to the county. The county, so we are technically all county employees. The county covers us insurance-wise, liability-wise, and all of that. There was another agreement since then where that was clarified as to who the hiring authority was, who covered insurance-wise, who did payroll, and that sort of thing. Part of the agreement was that the majority of the staffing was 50-50. We do have 2 particular full-time staff who are majority city funded, and that's our city forester, who there's also a statute that sets the ability to have a city forester. He's 90-10. And then we have our park superintendent, who I believe is 60-40, 60 city, 40 county, because it's mainly the operation of the pools. So everybody else is pretty closely 50-50, and then the other part of that agreement was that our equipment was 50-50. So we have a rolling stock amount that comes forward to the city council and the county board during the budget process every year, where it's a 50-50 split of all equipment. We do, if there's specific equipment that's only county or only city, then we do fund that through those correct avenues. For instance, our Zamboni is the only piece of equipment that I know of that's solely county. So the city doesn't pay anything for the Zamboni at Marathon Park. But like our piston bullies, we do have one at Sylvan Hill, which is a city facility, and we have one at 9 Mile, so those are split 50-50. So with that, in doing more research, and in your packet, there's quite a bit of information that we have provided to you. A memo was sent out to you from the city attorney, Ms. Jacobson, that kind of gave you the idea of where we were headed with this discussion today, and just to give you information on how we might move forward. And she'll jump in whenever we are ready to. So I included in here the information on the Parks Commission, the bylaws that were in here, how it is set by county code into how it's made up, what its tasks are, and then we also included the 1974 agreement or resolution between the city and the county, as well as in Ms. Jacobson's memo. She really does do a really good job of the background of the different resolutions that have been in place over time, kind of clarifying some of those roles. One thing that's not clarified specifically is the specific tasks of the department. It's kind of morphed over the years as parks are built, as new properties are acquired, as things change. I have a very good idea of what my job and my tasks are for our department when it comes to both city and county facilities. In my role and our whole staff's role, we do not look at our job as city versus county. We are the Parks Department, and we treat all of the parks equally, and we address what needs work. So right now, we had a storm on Wednesday that was pretty devastating. I would say 80% of our time was spent in the city, or still is in the city, because of the boulevard trees and the things that we have down. You can see Yankee Park still has a tree down. The parks are our lowest priority at this point because we're still working on the homeowners and the streets and the boulevard trees. We do spend a lot of time in Marathon Park, so we'll address that for safety concerns. But we don't look at whether or not it's city, county in any way that we do that. So in also doing the research, kind of looking back as to if in 1974 the city park board was supposed to be dissolved and this park commission was put together, the question was, well, what's the authority? Why do we have 3 city council members sitting on the park commission if all the park commission's been looking at is county stuff? And why do we have a city park board when it's not supposed to be there if we're only looking at city, and what's the authority? So this is where Ms. Jacobson can maybe add some more, in that it is set by charter that there is a city park committee, but there is nothing in the city code or anything that gives this committee any direction or authority to make any decisions. So when we look back, it looks like in 1992, I think it was, or I have to go back more, when Mayor Lawrence was the mayor, 2002, I think it was. It's in this memo. 2002? Yeah. Oh, yeah, April 2002. It sounds like that. It looks like that's when the City Park Committee was put back into place. And according to what she had in her notes and in the meeting minutes, it was supposed to be an advisory, or a committee that was supposed to advocate for the parks and the city parks to the Park Commission, is what that. I think over time, since 2002, and my predecessor began bringing only city things to this committee and only county things to the county committee. So really, in general, the idea is that the Park Commission, being represented by both, should see all park-related items through our department. And then with respect to that, it will come to, if it's financial or if it's personnel, it still needs to come through the city council if it's a city issue, and it needs to go through the county board if it's a county issue. Anything that has to go to county board comes directly out of the Park Commission and goes to the Environmental Resources Committee. That's my standing committee on that side. On the city side, if it's financial, it would still go through the Finance Committee. If it's personnel, it should go through your HR or your Employee Resources Committee. I know they're different on the county and city, so I'm going to get them mixed up. But either way, the Park Commission doesn't have any authority to make final say when it comes to matters of policy and business for the city and the county. They do have authority to do, operation policy and items that don't have a financial impact or a personnel impact. So where we are today is to basically bring this back. We have a new city council. We have a fairly new county board with majority of the members new. We are just trying to clean up where we are today and what this committee stands for, if it should remain the way that it is, if it needs to change, if it needs to get some direction, and if we treat the county the way that it is. So what we are planning to do is to, I found a draft of 1992 contract for services that my predecessor had put together that kind of laid out what the contract that the city has with the county means and what it entails, what the tasks of our department, how will be budgeted, how our personnel will be maintained, what committees we'll go to. So we plan on revamping that contract for services to modern day, since we are, 20 years or 30 years past that. And then bringing that to either it could go to one of three places: the executive committee that the city now has, or it could go to a council of the whole for initial discussion, and then ultimately it's going to go to the city council for approval. And in there, we'll discuss as to whether this committee remains intact, and then it will have to, with that, put some responsibilities to it. It has to be outlined, just like any other committee on the city. It needs to have what those responsibilities and meaning is for it. Or it will be that this committee would revert back to the Park Commission, and that's how the business will be handled. And then, like I said, city things will come to city, county things will come to county. So that still has to come out yet, but we wanted to bring this forward for your information, for discussion. It's a lot of years in the making. It's a lot of different things that have happened. And we just want to be clear on what's expected of our department, what's expected from the city council, what's expected from the county board, and then how we move forward. And, as things change, as facilities get added, as facilities get removed, we will tweak those agreements that way. So I guess I covered most of it. Do you have anything to add?
You did a great job, Jamie. And anything I would add is just really more emphasizing what she's told you, but this all stems from the fact that we do need to comply with the state law, which says that at the request of a city, a county may assume and exercise certain powers conferred upon it for governing, managing, controlling, improving, and caring for the public parks, parkways, boulevards, and pleasure drives as evidenced by resolutions, and here's what we've been missing all these years, designating the particular park function, duty, or act, and the terms upon which the same shall be exercised by the county board. Such resolution shall state whether the authority or function is to be exercised exclusively by the county, jointly between the county and the city, and shall state that the exercise is in the public interest. So that's what we've really been missing, and with the change in staff and the change in statutes and things over the years, things got dropped, and as she pointed out, didn't get followed up upon, such as that draft proposed agreement from 1992, I believe was maybe approved by the county, but it never saw daylight at the city, and so things didn't, we don't even have the same number of resolutions that went back and forth between the county and the city. So we've had a number of questions come up over the years with regard to park rangers enforcing county park ordinances, city park ordinances within the city parks and things of that nature. And does Jamie have the power as a county employee to shut down our parks? Or is that a policy decision made by the city council governing its parks? It's my opinion that we have surrendered jurisdiction over our parks to the county. But if you want to retain anything, we didn't specify that because we never followed through. So when I think it was Mayor Lawrence was asked if she could reinstitute the park committee, they made one attempt actually, which is outlined in the memo, my memo, back in 1992, and I think that's why you got confused, because they did it in 92 and 2002. So they tried to create the City Parks and Recreation Committee in 1992, but the council didn't pass it, and instead they just slotted it in the council rules. They added it to the list of standing committees. But all of your other standing committees have reports that are usually put forth by the then mayor as to the duties and functions of that committee, and then you pass that as well. There's no report, there's nothing that goes with our budget money to the county, there's no report on what the duty, the function, the purpose of the standing City Parks and Recreation Committee is. So I frankly don't really know, other than through habit and practice, how you decided what was going to go to which agenda, and sometimes it overlaps for Jamie as well, going back and forth. So I know my memo was rather long, but we agree, I think, that that's our recommendation, that we either come up with a contract for services with the county to delineate or write out so we're all clear about what it is we're paying the county to do, so we're not overlapping services or getting into situations where we don't understand who has the authority to do whatever it is we're looking at. So I think we're on the same page with that. Anything else you want to add, Jamie?
No, well, the only thing is, when this goes to city council for discussion, and it's talked about if the city wants to retain, the city still has, I shouldn't say authority, retain authority, because the city still has ultimate authority over anything that has to go to the city council. That's not, the Parks Committee, you as a Parks Committee and the Park Commission do not have the authority to make the final decisions for funding and budgeting and that sort of thing. So either way, the city council retains that authority and the county board retains that authority. But if it's specified that there is to be a Parks Committee in addition to the Parks Commission, and that needs to be clarified as to what specific would come here and what would go to the Park Commission, and would we have duplicate of services, or do we change the makeup of those? And then it's going to open up the can of worms of the joint department and personnel and equipment and all the stuff that goes with it, right? Correct?
Yeah, it's not currently now not a joint department. It's a county department. Yeah. But we, through the legislative enactment, conferred or gave up our exercise of authority to the county. But then at some point, because there were disagreements or, with different staff, different mayors over time, they'd study it and decide how they were going to get along better or resolve their differences, and would try different proposed plans or proposed committees, and they didn't always jive with one another. So now we've got the benefit of hindsight of looking back at how this all evolved with the state statute, and now we know what we need to do to clarify it. Yes?
So how did we come about as a Parks Commission for the city? I mean,
Well, back in 1992, they attempted it, and then in 2002, like Jamie said, I think Mayor Lawrence was here then, and I think she asked my predecessor whether she could create a Parks Committee. And from the notes I found, and I'm not throwing anybody under the bus, he said the council can do whatever they want. And I agree with that. As long as the majority of you agree, you can do whatever you want, as long as it's not illegal. But because of prior action of conferring through those joint resolutions the power to the county, you can create a city park committee, sure, if the majority of you want to do that, but what's their purpose? There was no report that went with it or any memo that explained to them at the time, you've already given up all of your authority to manage the parks to the county. So you can legally go ahead and create your own committee, but for what purpose? That's the piece that was missing. So they simply just got rid of the other Parks and Recreation Committee that was proposed in 1992, never passed the council. It was a full ordinance that laid out the duties of it and everything, didn't pass. So then what they did is they just added it to the list of standing committees with nothing else with it. No memo, no report, no little blurb about what they're supposed to do like we have for all of our other standing committees. So I can't explain to you how that happened, but that's what they did. That's what the public record shows, is that they just added it as a standing committee to our list of standing committees in the rules. Tom, did you have a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you. So I don't think you were throwing anyone under the bus. It sounds like the bus is kind of long gone in terms of the time frame here, a few decades. But just so I understand the long and short of it, the city's been operating a committee, this committee, without any real codified authority or allocation of duties and responsibilities, apparently for decades, or at least many
Correct.
years. That's
Correct.
And, I know that there can sometimes be some lack of continuity with new staff and situations that are unexpected, but it does make me think along this situation, along with others I've encountered recently, it seems like a contract and agreement review might be a very good thing to start as soon as possible, because it seems that what we're finding now is that within City Hall, whether it's this or perhaps other departments or buckets, we're actually lacking codification or agreement. So in addition to fixing this seems to be almost a global issue in terms of city policy. So that seems like it may be productive. Thank you.
Well, and as Jamie said, you're welcome. This was brought up because somebody was challenging her authority I was asked to give a legal opinion on whether or not she had the authority, not personally, but as the director of the county department, to close city parks during COVID. And I started digging and looking, and I went back to the statute and the creating authority to see how we got where we were. And I've got stacks of files like this on my floor. So that's how you got the 7-page memo. But when I went back and looked at the public record, it was just step here, a step there, and then there'd be a new mayor, and then there would be a new parks director, and then it just kind of kept going on and on. So you've managed beautifully, I think, over the decades holding this meeting and putting together agendas. But when push came to shove, I said, I don't think you have any authority. You can keep meeting, but you've given up the management and control of the city park facilities to the county.
Thank you. And yeah, I think we need to make sure there's no more chasms like this, whether it comes down to authority or agreements with other parties. Thank you.
So I'll sit down. If anybody else has any other questions,
just-
it's fine. Okay, Lou?
I just kind of, I kind of like the idea of having a handle on our parks as a city. I like, like you say, educational items. They're all city, stuff. And that's why I think this committee is important, because I think that, I think city stuff could get lost in a joint, when everything goes to the county, like is suggested. And perhaps I can use this as an example. A few years ago, Marathon County implemented a wheel tax. So we have probably 30,000 vehicles in this city that pay wheel tax, but the county never sends any money back to fix their streets. So that's an example. I don't want to lose touch with our parks.
And that's been a concern, voiced by everybody over the decades, as they feel like they still want to have some input. So whether that's advisory, in nature to the county commission, or I don't know how you were thinking about that, Jamie, but
Well, really how it should work is everything that I have on the City Parks Committee agenda and everything I have on the Park Commission agenda becomes one agenda. So I don't have, all these city updates would be on the Park Commission agenda. And that's how it should work. So it will not, if it goes to how it should work, it will not continue how it has been, where it has been separated. And really what I should be doing now is taking everything to the Park Commission anyway, because really they have the authority to make any real recommendations to the city council. I hadn't done that because it was for those city council members that are on the Park Commission for the reason of keeping the pulse and being engaged in city park issues. It's duplicate for them right now to attend 2 meetings. And so that it didn't make sense. So if you have one park commission, the park commission should cover city and county, and it can't get lost in the county, because if it's a city issue, it has to come to the city council. A city issue would never go to the county board. The county board can't make the financial decision because it's not their budget, for instance. So I go through the budget process just like all the other department heads do for the city. That doesn't change. So the park commission would become, and that's why it's 3 and 3. There's 3 county board
I
members.
was just going to say that
3
if there's
city
equal
council members.
representation and they choose together the citizen member.
Right. So, if this were to change, it makes no sense to have 3 city council members on the park commission if they're talking about county policy. And that's the biggest change. It's a duplicate of service. It's duplicate for the city. The city now has extra say in the parks because of the 2 committees than the county does. And the county system is a little bit larger, I guess, in acreage anyway. But that's how it should work, and it is my job as the director to make sure that that all of our park issues, city and county, are properly vetted and discussed at the park commission, and that all the
Right.
information is there so that the right direction can be given as to whether it goes to the city or the county. If I'm not doing that, then that's where those 3 city council members or county board members say to me, like, this, what my job is to make sure that that whole park system comes to that committee and it is addressed properly. So the city should not lose any touch or authority over their parks if they are active in this commission, like they should be. There's no reason to have the duplicate
Right.
of the members.
Right. So it wasn't so much that you were illegally created, because the council did by a majority make up a name of a committee and create it, but you can't really do that in a vacuum. And given the background and the whole legal, creation of everything and the changes in the statutes and all the resolutions that preceded this, it just didn't make a lot of sense to me, because I don't know what power and authority you retained, and I checked with Mary Ann with finance, I've checked with Jamie, we've checked with the clerk's office, we've gone down in the basement, we've gone through to find any documentation we can, and we just can't turn up anything in writing that, other than this draft contract from 1992 that proposes to separate those duties and functions as the statute requires us to do. But that was never agreed to.
Yep, go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, I'd echo, I think, Alder Larson's sentiment about the city and the city putting itself first on city matters, and I think subordinating it to essentially another level of government, even though it's a hybrid committee, it's still the county. I don't know if that necessarily puts the city first, and I had concerns about that when there were suggestions of combining the diversity committees, and I'm not suggesting that the park staff has imploded or self-destructed like the county's diversity or equity efforts. I mean, they self-destructed, and I think that could be seen that may occur sometime before it happened. And had we tied our ship to that sinking dock when it came to those committees, even though they're just kind of advisory, I think we'd find ourselves in a pretty unfortunate situation in that policy bucket right now. So, I think park staff and the department has done an excellent job and a really commendable job. But still, I appreciate and commend the county for some of its fiscal efforts and how it's handled those things. I think I wouldn't care to subordinate any city policy matter to the county, given its track record on other issues. Thank you.
And that's part of the agreement that will come forward. If that's something the city council wants to have each policy come to them, we'll put that in that agreement. So it would not allow the county to make policy for the city, or we could specify that.
Right. Just as long as we both agree and we both have resolutions that are compliant with the statute.
Yep.
So we envision going through all of our ordinances and other things as well to make sure that we don't just tie up a contract, but that everything else is meshing together. Carol, did you have your hand up?
So 2 questions. So first, this decision, whatever we decide, would have to go to city council anyway, correct? Now, like, on what,
Well, at this point, we're not asking the committee to make any recommendation
Okay.
because I guess when we just figure as a committee, you don't want to go away, you know? This is really it's a council decision, so you'll be part of, you're on the council, so you'll be part of that decision. So whether we take the initial first draft of the contract to the executive committee that the mayor has put together, or we take it to a council of the whole, just to kind of go through in more detail what the history that's been found to try to bring everybody up to speed and what's been done, what hasn't been done. Or if it goes directly to city council to be talked about, that's, I guess, yet to be determined on what the best course of action, and probably a call of the mayor, I would assume, and how that's going to be. But ultimately, it has to come to the city council for, yes, you to make a decision on how this moves forward.
okay, but we're not being asked to make any decision, okay.
And I
Actually-
grabbed everything but my agenda. Did you put action on number 5 tonight, or was it just a discussion item?
Discussion and
I-
possible action.
I put discussion possible
Okay.
action, in case there wanted to be some, but we are not really technically asking any, at this point. We know that we're going to move forward on trying to clarify what we are by law required to clarify, moving forward.
And I was just going to say that would be my concern too, as both of you have spoken. But at the same time, that my concern that, you know, we wouldn't, that city issues for us on this committee remain a priority, but it sounds as though, I mean, we don't have any real authority anyway, so, yeah. And you're not you're just saying, okay, we should clean it up somehow.
Yes,
Your
I mean, you have
recommendation
several
is-
legal options, some of which are more recommended by the staff than others. You know, you could withdraw your agreement with the county and start from scratch. We're not recommending that, but that would be a legal option. But you have to give them, I think, like 12 months' notice to terminate your agreement with them, which would unwind everything and be a lot of work.
Yeah.
But that's the legal way to terminate that relationship. Or we can just try to comply with the statute by saying, okay, now we're going to agree to put in a resolution, the duties we're conferring upon you, or we can just treat it as a contract for services and put in a contract what we expect them to do with the money that we budget for them every year. But I think contemplated with that would be the dissolution of the city park committee, unless for some reason you withheld some powers that you wanted to retain for consideration by this committee. Or you keep it and it remains an advisory committee to the park commission.
Yeah.
I just have one
Thank
other
you.
example to put to this committee. You know, the action that we've taken on Riverside Park, I don't believe would have happened had this been a joint venture. I don't know, I haven't been on the county commission, I just got appointed there, but I don't know if that would have happened without this committee here.
I don't know, I mean, it hasn't gone to that, but it would have gone to them and we would have had all the same discussion as we've had here.
It would have, yes, but it
Yep.
didn't.
It didn't purposely, because that's not how we've been operating, but we aren't operating correctly right now. So going forward, that's on the park commission will now have duplicate meetings, because I will put everything on the park commission like I'm supposed to. And then if it's coming back here, you'll see it twice. So you, Don, and Carol will see it twice. And that is another thing we talked about is, you know, if you're recommending something from the park commission that's city related and you've already the majority of the parks committee, then for the two of you that are not on the park commission, is it worth your time to come here if the majority's already spoken and it's just going to be a pass-through to the city council? Like, that was your job as a representative of the city on the park commission, is to make those recommendations and to make those arguments and to make those proposals of what comes to the city. That's what you're appointed to do on the park commission. So everything now is something that I have to do, I think, to show to the commission that they need to be looking at the county as a whole, as the whole system, and not siloed into county versus city, because that the county members have to look at the system as a whole, and so do you as city members have to look at the system as a whole. We are a parks department that has a system that we are to maintain. And if that means this month the priority is Marathon Park because it's a disaster zone, that's what the commission should focus on. If the next month, the priority is River Life Park or a city park, then that's what the commission's responsibility is to look at the good of the whole department and to keep in mind, those that you represent, but to look at it as the best of the city and the best use of the public tax dollars. Either way, we're county employees that are doing the best for the community, and how we spend our county budget and how we spend our city budget is the direction of what the priorities are of the park commission.
And this opinion's been shared with the county. I mean, that's
Yep.
not a secret. We've met with Corporation Counsel, Scott Corbett, as well as Mike Pierner and Lance Leonard, and told them, this is what we think is going on, just to see if we could see what they thought the answer to this question was for the original legal question, and they were completely unaware of all of this. I mean, they're young and new. And so we dug out all this stuff, and we had several public meetings with them over this. So they're well aware of it too. I don't know if the Parks Commission has met yet or discussed this, but
We just gave them a brief overview at the
Okay,
last
kinda
meeting.
like this?
The same
Okay.
thing, yeah.
very good.
Yep. So
Thank
Donna,
you.
they've heard it twice now.
Okay. Oh, all right.
But not as much in detail. We didn't go as
Okay.
much in detail at the last meeting. Yep. Mr. Kelly?
Thank you. I mean, I guess if we were to look at this, the silver lining of the situation, I do think it's germane to the item because it seems like it may be a microcosm of things. And, I do feel that it would make sense, given what we've learned with the Parks and Recreation Committee, that really there's no codified authority or allocation of duties and responsibilities. I think that across the board with the city, we need to have full internal accounting of agreements, contracts, see what doesn't exist, see what's expired, because I know everyone's done their best, but I find it unsettling that a committee's really been operating, without any official codified foundation for some time. Thank you.
So more to come.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Ready to go to the next one? Okay. Since we have a new committee we have a few of you returning and a few new, and many of you that have been around for a long time, I wanted to just briefly go through kind of an overview of our department, and I got to bring up my presentation here. Except for I got the wrong one. Oh, where'd it go? Oh, here. Okay. We will zoom this in. I don't know how to get that off the screen. Too many computers. Okay. So it's in your packet. I had put a PowerPoint of our department, and I'll just briefly go through it because many of you know, but I wanted to open it up and allow you to ask any questions that you might have. Here we go. So this is the presentation I had put together for actually one of the foundations in the community who was interested in what we were doing and supporting the items that we do, our facilities and our programs, and it doesn't, in general. So I thought it was a good background of what our department is and our structure and our overview. So as we just talked about, we are a county department. So we do go off of the county's vision and mission, but it's very similar to the city. So they have a very similar goal. Basically, we want to be the best place to live, work, and play. Marathon County, we want to be the healthiest, safest, and most prosperous county in the state. I don't think that is something that the city doesn't want either. So that's kind of the overarching, but we do have a specific Parks and Recreation and Forestry Department mission, and that's to actively manage our parks and forest lands for natural resources sustainability while providing healthy recreational opportunities and unique experience, making the county and the city a desirable place to live, work, and play. I think it goes hand in hand that the county as a whole encompasses every community that we touch. I know you can't see this in your packet or on the TV right now, but that's our department structure. So you'll see that I have the different committees that we report to. County board and city council are both on there. I have 2 assistant directors. My assistant director of operations oversees our operations shop and all of the seasonals that go with it, including the managers and the arborists that are in there. And then our community service assistant director oversees basically our special events, all of our contract management, our operations in the offices, and has the community outreach with many of our organizations. And then we have the county forest administrator, who is 100% county, but he is actually 50% funded by a DNR grant through the state, a county forest administrator grant. And then we have 1 county forester. So we operate 2 separate park systems, but we do operate as one, and we put a little history in there. 17 county parks, we actually have 37 city parks. I need to update that. And then our special facilities. So we have, our 2 ice arenas, shooting range, our People's Sports Complex. We've got Sylvan Tubing Hill, our skate park, our boat launches, the 400 block, and then the 3 aquatic centers are probably our most unique items there on the city side. This you cannot see either, but I do have this paper copy. If you'd like it, I can always email it out to you. It's on our website, but it includes all of the parks and forests that we operate, and then the amenities that they have. So we give this out, and we use this too when people call our office about, which park has which amenity and how many ball fields and how many tennis courts and stuff like that. We are funded through both the city and the county. I go through the budget process in both entities, like the department heads do, and everything else. So we have a little under a $5 million total budget that is both the city and the county, and that's with our revenue and expenditures. We bring in about 1.2 million in revenue from on the county side, which is predominantly our timber sales and our camping revenue. And then of our 421,000 that we bring in revenue on the city side, it's mainly our recreation programs, and our shelter rentals are probably our biggest thing there, our special events. So our goal as a whole department, though, is to look at our sustainability of our department and figure out how we can be less tax levy supported from both entities. Whether that's revenue generation, reduction of some of our expenditures by looking at how we manage some of our parklands, or looking at sponsorships of different sorts. We had updated the sponsorship policy for both the city and the county last year, so we have the ability now, just like we do at the People's Sports Complex, to get buy-in from our community and partners that way. So we'll be working on that this year. We serve all of Marathon County, but particularly Marathon County Parks and the City of Wausau Parks. So we get this mixed up a lot of times. I just had a person call me today asking about Depke Park. Well, that's a Town of Vermountain Park. It is not within our system. We do not do anything for that park, but we specifically do. We maintain them for quality of life. Tourism has been a large aspect we've been focusing on, especially with the new executive director of CVB and his goals. So we'll be working on there and getting our unique facilities. And then natural resources. We have the river that runs through the city. We have county forests. We have habitat. We're on a number of other rivers throughout the other parks that we have. So we work with our different departments on that. We build our park system by our outdoor recreation plans. These are both, outdoor recreation plans are required by the state DNR, who has an overall outdoor recreation plan. In order for us to get grant funding, we need to have these in place. So our city one, we are updating this year, because it actually went through the end of last year, but we had funding in our CIP to update it, so we're having a kickoff meeting next week. Our county one was updated. I would like to get them both on the same timeline, so that essentially we have one outdoor recreation plan to work with for the entire system, but we do work with both of them, and they prioritize the items we focus on for CIP and our small projects each year. They also tie in together. They reference each other, and they reference the the county strategic plan. When the city's strategic plan is finished, we will reference the city's strategic plan as well and align both of these with those. When we build our park system, we build them through, we do get some funding through capital projects, but it's a lot done through grants, through donations and improvements, partnerships and sponsorships. Partnerships are probably the biggest thing I wanted to point out in how we build our park system. We have CWalk, Central Wisconsin Off-Road Cycling Coalition, who has built the majority of our mountain biking trails within this county. And that includes Sylvan Hill and 9 Mile of the ones that we manage. And today they have a trail boss out at each one of them that helps maintain those trails. Our staff does some maintaining of those trails, and we do some work on them, but the majority is done by volunteers. They don't get paid for it, and they provide this amenity for us so that we can have what we have. Same with our Wausau Nordic, our Wausau Pickleball Club. The Canoe and Kayak Corporation has done everything on that whitewater rafting course. The county and the city barely put any money other than maintenance costs into that. And then our other local organizations that we have that help with fundraising and put money back into improving our facilities. We also do a lot of collaborations, especially with programming, and we're increasing those. So I think last weekend we had our Splash Into Safety at our pools, which was a huge hit, and we partner with Aspirus and our Safe Kids of Marathon County to provide life jackets to our area residents and different safety things. So that's one of the really great partnerships we have. The Wausau Noon Optimists and the Kiwanis have helped fund different programs that we do. They give money towards playgrounds and infrastructure. So our partners are extremely important. I can briefly touch on this. This was, like I said, more for when I did that presentation to the foundation, is we do have a Wausau and Marathon County Parks and Recreation Foundation. And we have one member of our park commission who serves on that foundation board to help represent our system, as well as I'm on that foundation board, and the past 2 parks directors are also on that foundation board. So there's 3 generations of my position on the foundation. But they are there to help build our park system and provide an additional funding. They're not a large foundation, but they do have some means of funding. And Iron Bull, that is in the community, was a brainchild and the development from the Park Foundation. So for every Iron Bull event, the foundation does get some revenue from those events that goes back into our park system. As we all know, like every other department, we have staffing and wage challenges. So the county is currently going through a class and compensation study. I know the city was just talking about it at the last council meeting as well, or I think the finance committee meeting. But the county is going through it knowing that they hadn't done it since 2016, and our wages are very far off. We also have the challenges, like of the state levy limits, and the more we get more and more on our plate and not any more funding to do it. We have aging facilities, and that's both city and county. We have aging facilities, and our demand on the parks, especially we saw during COVID, was through the roof, and more people are demanding the use of the services and the facilities and staffing, so that's been a challenge. As well as just looking at what does the community need as a whole and trying to work with our other local community leaders to decide, if baseball has just contacted me back, they want to relook at like a baseball complex. Well, does that mean it has to be in the city of Wausau? Does that mean it could be in the region? Who's going to use it? We want to look at these big facilities because they are expensive to maintain, to build, to manage, but we want them to be used by as many people as possible to make them worthwhile and to make the community proud of what they have. So those type of things we're looking at to do it as a region versus as individual municipalities. Future projects that we're working on, just a couple of them, the Kayak and Bike Share. The Bike Share program should be back up and running here shortly. The Kayak Share program, we are investigating. We've met with 2 different companies and look at where we can get funding for that to have a very similar item on the river. For the county side, we're looking at snowmaking and fat tire biking at 9 Mile. The West Side Master Plan is something the city and the county of Bun both heavily involved with, and that will be having some updates come out here shortly as the consultants are working on some new concept plans. We're working on trail connections and some undeveloped park parcels that we are going forward. Our ARPA projects, I am just about to issue my RFP for the skate park to get a design-build consultant on board so we can get the skate park built that the city council provided ARPA dollars for. I present my ARPA projects on the county side to the county tomorrow at 3 o'clock, so we'll see how those go. So those are some of the initiatives we're working on. And then just looking at our customers, our Facebook followers are growing. That's probably our biggest source of communication at this point. We have had some counts being able to look at Google Analytics on where people's phones ping to say how many people have been using our parks throughout all of our park system. Our campgrounds have never been more full as they are now. And, we've done different surveys through our outdoor recreation plan updates. The other thing that has been a really big benefit to our department is our partnership with the Sheriff's Office and the Wausau Police Department. Specifically, the Sheriff's Office funded, or didn't fund, the Parks Department had always had a park ranger on staff. When he retired, our current sheriff doesn't deputize anybody not under the sheriff's jurisdiction anymore, which is completely makes sense. So we were able to work out an agreement with them where our department does fund through county dollars, the county budget, one sheriff's deputy that's fully funded by our department, and then the other sheriff's deputy is 100% funded through the DNR grants that they get for snowmobile and boat patrol. So we are given 2 dedicated Marathon County Sheriff's deputies that are recreation deputies. Now they each are on our special team. One's on the dive team, one's on the bomb squad, so they do have to go out every once in a while for those duties. But they have had a huge presence in our parks. They work very closely with Wausau PD when there's something called in on a city park. They can deal with it by one of those resolutions, gave some authority. Well, that was to rangers, but the county sheriffs has authority in areas too. But the city police department has really been great to work with as well, with our staff and with these deputies to we've had a lot of illegal dumping this year, and they've worked together and have caught quite a few people. So that's been a good thing because that's a big expense for us is to empty those garbage bins. And then what we wish we could do better, obviously updating our facilities, providing more staffing and more recreation programs, and becoming a bigger partner in community events. When we did our 101 anniversary for the city parks last year, or county parks last year, it was a really fun event that our department had a good time with. We wish we could do more of those. So, in 2024, we could celebrate 50 years of a joint department or 100 years of joint kind of facility. So we could do it all over again. But we do have a part in any special event, really, that takes place in our park system, whether it's city or county. Our staff is behind the scenes doing a lot of that, and it's nice to be known that we're a partner with many of these events. So that's a super fast overview of the department and kind of what makes us up. And I did include in your packet our work plan and our year in review, which some of you saw. I think 3 of you that were on the Parks Committee last year saw at the beginning of the year, but for the 2 newer committee members, this is an overview of what we did in 2021 and then our work plan moving forward for 2022. And we've already started to cross a lot of those off our list, so far so good. We don't need any more storms because that puts us back 2 weeks. So any questions on the department or anything I went over? All right. You want me to go into the educational updates?
Sure.
The park updates, very brief. This month, Athletic Park, basically everything's up and running. has been our biggest challenge of just getting, our seasonal staff doesn't start until the end of May, and the Woodchucks' first game was May 31st. So we put in some overtime with our staff to get that facility up and running and ready to go for that first game. We actually did have a couple games before that. They just weren't as large of events as the Woodchucks opener. And we put up new signage for the parking areas. We're trying to work with the Woodchucks to get our patrons to know where they can park during the games and where they shouldn't park during the games. So you may have seen some of that signage up. City pools are up and open. We filled them around Memorial Day. I haven't been to them today, but I'm assuming they're fairly busy today. We did have an issue yesterday with over the weekend with our network being down. We had a contractor at North Central Healthcare cut a fiber line that affected the entire system. So I know they're working on it, but I think we're back up and running. We have for the dog park, we're working on getting it all fully back open. The small dog area is open. I have seen some really good growth in the grass that we planted up there, so I think we can open the large dog area soon. We do have the agility equipment in and the pad for the shelter in. The shelter won't take long to put up, but they're putting it up as time allows. It will be up soon, but it's kind of not the highest priority on the list right now. We can still open the dog park without the shelter being there. It's going to go right on top of that slab. Forestry, planting was underway. We got to get back to it. With that storm last weekend, they're doing cleanup. And I wanted to point out, especially with Mr. Lindman here, how my city forester called me on Friday and talked about how well he worked with, Chris, I think? Well, there was two other guys he worked with that he specifically, Dustin too, but the crew leads you have for Public Works with that storm last Wednesday, everybody worked extremely well together, and Public Works helped in one area, Forestry went in another area, and they collaborated on what was needed, and it was a really good team effort, and I think we threw everybody that we had at it. I think you probably did too. So I got a couple of comments on Facebook about how fast they all were out getting trees cleaned up and roads open, and very impressive. And I had another 2 phone calls today, actually, with just how well the crews all did last week with the unexpected storm. We expected the one in the evening, which didn't materialize to too much, but the one in the morning, none of us were expecting, I don't think. So thank you, Eric, for that, and thank your crew, because it went well. And even though we don't like storms like that, it's really neat to see the crews all come together and work as one, and to just get our community open and operating. So we're still working on cleanup, as I mentioned, though. Parks are our last priority. As you'll see when we get to Yonke Park, when you come back to City Hall, and that tree is cleaned up, but they're working on it. I mentioned the dumping. Our garbage, I would just put this in there because it's a pretty significant cost we have to our department. And we went through and we cleaned it all up to know exactly where we have dumpsters, how many we're paying for. The company that we contract with had dumpsters we were paying for that we didn't even have, but had other dumpsters out there that we weren't paying for that we had. So it's all been cleaned up. And now we're working within the budget we have, so we're tweaking some of our pickup times, but we've had a lot of illegal dumping, so that's been a challenge as well. We're still working on ADA compliance. One thing I don't have on here for a city update is working with the PD on the members of our community that are down at the gazebo. Yeah, the gazebo. And when we find encampments on the island, we're having a meeting tomorrow just to discuss the communication part of that, what they want from our staff and what we should communicate to the police and stuff like that, so we can work with them closely. Then it's just routine operations and programs. So any updates on park updates before we get to the next one? Okay, the last one, and I can't answer a lot of questions on this, so Mr. Lemon maybe can answer more. We just got the latest report from the Riverside Park Environmental Remediation for your review. It is under review by the DNR, and we're waiting for those comments on how to move forward. So you can look at it, but once we get it approved by the DNR, then the city will move forward with bidding out any work for the remediation that's necessary. So, Mr. Lemon, do you have anything more to add, I guess, to that specifically? Any questions?
Mr. Lindman?
We do have a
Mr.
member from
REI?
REI here as well.
We also have Matt here from REI for specifics, so.
Thank you, and thank you for REI's work on this. I know it's been a long process. Assuming the DNR, approves the kind of proposed remediation soon or at some point, how long after DNR approval would the city anticipate? I mean, I know there's probably going to be some things that have to go through finance or some bidding or what have you, but can we anticipate if the DNR approves this in the very near future that this remediation would occur this summer?
Yeah, that would be our expectation, that we'd be able to get something bid and the work done yet this year, depending on what has to get done.
Okay, excellent. And now I did in the report, it talks about confirmation sampling, some before and some after the excavation. And it noted that that confirmation sampling at the southwest portion, that would end at property lines there because there's property there. Is that correct?
Yeah, so on the sampling side, there's kind of two sets of samples that will be collected. The first, the landfill for their permit requirements before they can accept the soil, they need to know that it passes certain analytical parameters. So those would be what's considered a composite sample. So we take soil from multiple areas, mix it together, and they want 3 to 4 samples composited across the site. So we more than likely do lines going down the slope at different depths where we expect to excavate. Then with the excavation, the DNR is going to require confirmation samples to show that all the material has been removed. Because we could, my recommendation was to collect some of those samples before the excavation just to verify, because with dioxins, there's not a good way to field screen for them. Like with a volatile compound, we can pretty easily field screen for to see if we've removed it. So on those sides where we expect to remove it all, collecting those confirmation samples before the actual excavation takes point to make sure that we are removing all that material so we don't go out there, excavate it, get the analytical results back a month later from the lab and find out that there's still material out there that has to be removed.
Thank you. And my question about the southwest area, it's because there are residential backyards there. So I believe definition of contamination ceased at property lines, and also that would, I assume the confirmation samples won't cross property lines. Was there ever any discussion with the DNR in order to get a more fully defined contamination area of discussing access agreements with residents? And I guess, and correct me if I'm mistaken, but is the only reason that the definition of contamination ceased at residents' backyards is because that's where city property ceased, or would definition have continued in another scenario?
So in this scenario, because the park is the most down gradient section, the DNR, they wanted it defined to the property boundaries. If any samples were taken beyond that, I can't say for sure, but there's a chance that any of those property owners might get their own responsible party letter and have to do an investigation, because they wouldn't consider that the city's fault unless you find the ultimate source of all this material.
And that leads into probably my last question right now, that DNR has made no attribution of a source at this point. Is that correct?
No, and I guess they don't generally define the source. That's something, again, if it was like a petroleum release, they'd leave that up to the consultant. We need to tell them what the source is. In these situations where it's a down gradient property, they tend to stop at the property boundary. Not always, mainly because they don't want someone paying for a cleanup that they're not truly responsible for. we can do additional sampling trying to identify the ultimate source. Definitely can, but as far as for the investigation at the park, the DNR was, I guess, okay with stopping at that property boundary.
Sure, and that brings up then a follow-up question. So dioxin, unlike maybe PAHs or heavy metals like lead, that's kind of an exotic contaminant of concern. I think polluters like to say that dioxin's ubiquitous. However, high concentrations of dioxin are not ubiquitous. In fact, it's fairly rare, and there's only a couple sites in central Wisconsin or this area I can think of, like Weisenberger, Tye, and Lumber, and Waleco, that have high concentrations of dioxin. So, you know, just as the representative for the area does raise a question for me. Are there any known responsible party or sites that are near that park that have ever been investigated by the DNR or EPA for, say, a contaminant of concern like dioxin?
I'm trying to think how much dioxin sampling we did on the Waleco site. I think there has been some. I don't know if that, and that probably ties in partially to that. But I'd have to look into it more, honestly.
Well, thank you. And for the record, yes, in 1986, they tested the top 6 inches of soil on the Waleco site, and that came back at 174 parts per billion dioxin TEQ, which hasn't been confirmed by the department, but as in my layperson understanding, that's the highest level ever sampled for a dioxin TEQ in the history of the state of Wisconsin. But my question about that site would be, is that a mile from the park? Is that a block from the park? Or is that 1 foot from the park if you look at former S&E property?
I believe a portion of what is now 3M was historically the S&E property. That is pretty much one of the property boundaries we're buttoned up to. That's been heavily modified at this point into a retention pond. So more than likely what was normally surface materials has been buried by what they put in to make that retention pond. And then the rest of the legal property, I believe, is a block or two from the park, where most of the investigation work has been.
Sure. But the portion where they stored drums of high concentration of dioxin and penta waste, that was immediately adjacent to the park. And the reason I asked that question is because of what you said about not defining the contamination in residents' yards. You know, they said if there's an exceedance, they may get an RP letter, and I agree that they may. That's unfortunate, right? And that would be offensive, given one of the highest dioxin levels in Wisconsin history is immediately adjacent to this general area. So, one, I would thank the city and REI for doing this work, and I'm happy to hear that it's going to be thoroughly remediated through excavation. But I think as the representative of the area, as someone who cares about the finances of the taxpayer, and just as someone who values reason and common sense, it does concern me that these exceedances may come within a few feet or yards of residential backyards, and no attempt at definition was done beyond that. But in terms of the park itself, you know, I can say as the representative, I'm quite appreciative that this has finally occurred or is occurring. It's my understanding the city had samples in 2008, so it's taken roughly 14 years to address this. And as I'd said on an earlier issue, if there's a silver lining, I think the city can learn from its mistakes on environmental policy, and the next time it gets these types of levels on a city-owned property, it shouldn't take years of citizen effort and sacrifices to get to an outcome like this. This should have happened naturally. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank
All
you,
right,
Matt.
thanks.
Thank you. All right, you got the last two.
Do we have a date set?
Oh, yeah, we should talk about that. Well, you can ask for future agenda items first.
I think.
There you go.
Are there any future items that need to be addressed? I see none. Okay. Then I'm going to move on to the next one, number 9, our next meeting date. That is going to be turned over to Jamie.
Thank you. I put it on there, so our next meeting actually falls on July 4th. So I was going to bring up the city calendar to determine we could push it back one day to the 5th. I just wanted to pull up the calendar. It's on there so you can see what's on the 5th. There's a Board of Public Works in the afternoon. There's an Economic Development meeting at 5:15. So we could go again at 4, like we did today on the 5th. Or my other thought is we push it back a week to the 11th, and then there's a Human Resources Committee at 4:30. You could start the meeting at 5:30 or give them a little bit of time and say 5:45 or 6 o'clock. And I wanted to see what was the desire of the committee members.
Any comments on which dates you would prefer?
So the 5th would be a Tuesday, and that one would be at a 4 o'clock, 4 to 5:15. Or
You're
the
out of
following
town.
Monday, the 11th, and
You're
it
out
would
of
probably
town.
be a 5:45 or 6 o'clock meeting.
Lou will be out of town on the 5th of July,
Okay, oh, that's right.
but everybody else is okay for the 5th of July, 4 o'clock? Okay,
Is everybody available on the 11th, the following Monday?
yep.
No?
No.
So Sarah's not? Either one, okay.
Which-
So I guess, is there a preference? I think for those who would prefer on the 5th at 4 PM, raise your hand. Okay.
I'm flexible.
You're
Yeah,
flexible?
so am I.
Okay. Sarah- And who would prefer on the 11th? That makes it easier. It's a later meeting.
Whatever you decide, it's
Whatever.
fine with me.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I can be here for 11.
Okay. Okay. Well, we can,
Should we do it at the 11th at 5:45?
you want to do it at the 11th?
Or do you
Or
want to do it
the
the 5th? I'm fine with the 5th of July. I know that we'll have a quorum.
Yep.
Okay. That will be what it is then, July 5th at 4 o'clock.
Okay.
And then last but not least, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn. Do I have a motion? Motion made by Sarah. And do I have a second? Thank you by Tom. Meeting adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody. Have
Aye.
a good week. Oh, I'm sorry, ayes. Aye. All in favor? Aye.
I don't know that you need to do that at the end when you adjourn, but.
Once the agenda is out, or...
Well, typically, like